Hello, I'm tired. I'm tired of being told what to do and how to do it by self-appointed experts who want to control our lives. Now, there are lots of things which actually fit into that category, but in today's video I'm going to stick to one of them. We are constantly told to eat less meat to save the planet. Eat less meat to save the planet. That's not nutritional advice, it's not even science. It is part of a worldwide, coordinated, well-funded agenda to control what we eat. Eat less meat. Who's that directed at? You should eat less meat if you eat meat 7 days a week. What if you eat meat once a week? You should still eat less meat, because that's what they're saying. Everybody should eat less meat. This isn't nutritional advice. They're just nudging us in the direction they want us to go. Eat less meat to save the planet. Save the planet from what exactly? This is just a guilt trip. I mean, who wants to be the person that thinks to themselves, I ate steak 3 times this week and now the planet's broken? This is just a drip, drip, drip of psychological manipulation, and it is nonsense. And I will show you why it is nonsense. The thing is, the nonsense is getting worse. This is something I saw in the news just this week. New Zealand announces world-first plan to tax cow and sheep burps. New Zealand has announced a plan to tax livestock burps in an effort to curb the country's gas emissions. Methane emissions from animals is a well-known issue. Cows alone are responsible for about 40% of those planet-warming gases globally, mainly through their burps. The idea of taxing a byproduct of the natural process of ruminant digestion reminded me of something I saw recently. The most powerful governments on Earth can't keep a virus from spreading, but they say they can change the Earth's temperature if you pay more taxes. In the UK, just a few days later, the government is discussing the UK food strategy, which includes the introduction of vegan meals in the public sector. If you want to be vegetarian or vegan, then that's fine, you go ahead. I'm not here to tell anybody what to do. I'm just trying to tell people how much we are manipulated and how much we are lied to. In the news this week, vegan school meals on the menu under Boris Johnson's Grow for Britain strategy. All pupils will be given a vegan school dinner option under plans to reform public sector meals contained in the UK food strategy. Prisoners, hospital patients and workers in government buildings will also be given the option under the proposals, which are designed to encourage low-carbon meals. Also in the same news item, we would like public sector menus to make it as easy as possible for people to make sustainable choices. Evidence shows that plant-based food products are generally less carbon-intensive to produce than livestock products. Following recommendations from Mr. Dimbleby, the author of the UK food strategy, the government has acknowledged that meat farming is carbon-intensive and is also exploring ways to support alternative proteins, including lab-grown meat and beans and pulses. Do you see where this is going? Lab-grown meat. Who would benefit from lab-grown meat apart from the very small number of companies in the world that produced it? Everyone in the UK will know who this man is, but for those who don't, he is Sir Patrick Vallance. He is the UK government's chief scientific advisor. At the end of COP26 in October 2021, you know, that climate crisis gathering up in Glasgow where hundreds of celebrities flew in their private jets to tell everybody how to live. At the end of that, Sir Patrick Vallance said, "Eat less meat and fly less to help climate," says Patrick Vallance. UK's chief scientist has said that both green technology and behavioural changes will be needed to tackle climate change. Now, I'm sure Mr. Vallance is an intelligent man, and I'm also quite sure that he does not believe in pixies or fairies or goblins, but he does want you to believe that the climate of this planet is controlled by the digestive system of cows and sheep. The idea behind eat less meat is simple. It's all part of the climate change story. Certain molecules in the atmosphere are referred to as greenhouse gases because they slow down the escape of heat from the planet to space. And we are told if we keep adding these molecules to the air, the planet will get hotter and hotter. The best known greenhouse gases are carbon dioxide and methane. And when cows are digesting their food, they burp methane into the air. So we are all supposed to believe that eat less meat equals fewer cows, equals less methane, equals a cooler planet. The thing is, it's impossible for cows and sheep to add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Basic GCSE biology explains why. I'm sure we all know that plants grow by taking carbon dioxide out of the air and combining that with water from rainfall that comes up through their roots. They create cellulose molecules which they use to grow by using the energy from sunlight. In this process, oxygen is released and other sugars are also created that go down into their roots. I think it's common to think that plants grow out of the ground, but they do not. They grow out of the air. They're rooted in the ground and they get water and minerals from the ground, but their growth, their entire growth, comes from out of the air. Grass consists almost exclusively of cellulose. We can't eat grass because we don't have any enzymes to digest it. Interestingly, neither do cows or sheep, but they have a totally different digestive system with 4 chambers, one of the chambers being the rumen, which is basically a fermentation vat where lots and lots of bacteria anaerobically ferment the cellulose into the carbohydrates and fats and proteins that the cow or the sheep needs to live and to grow. A byproduct of that process is methane gas, which is produced at a rate of 5% of all the carbon atoms in the food that the cow is eating. So out of every 100 carbon atoms taken from the air to create a blade of grass, which is then eaten by a cow or sheep, 95 of those carbon atoms are absorbed by the animal, and 5 of them are belched out as methane. Methane stays in the air for about 10 years before it is oxidized back to carbon dioxide in the air, where it was in the first place when the plant absorbed it. This process is known as the carbon cycle, and it has been going on for millions of years. Ruminant animals cannot add new greenhouse gas to the air. They simply recycle some of it. According to the fossil record, the ruminant digestive system evolved about 50 million years ago. So the ancestors of cows, sheep, goats, bison, yaks, antelopes, kudu, ibex, elk, deer, caribou, and moose have been burping methane for 50 million years. If methane is so bad, why is it suddenly a problem now when it hasn't been a problem for tens of millions of years? Don't know what history, let's have a look at some history. This is a diagram of atmospheric methane levels going back to the year 1000. They gather this information from ice core samples. As you can see, from the year 1000 right through to almost 1800, methane levels fluctuated slightly but were pretty consistent, and then after 1800 they rise quite steeply. During those first 700 to 800 years, there were plenty of ruminant animals. It's estimated that on the American plains alone there were 50 to 60 million bison burping methane. But the methane levels stayed consistent. They were not increased by ruminant animals. So what happened to temperatures during this same timescale? This is a representation of the Earth's average temperature. In the year 1000, temperatures were increasing into what was known as the medieval warm period, where temperatures were actually warmer than they are now, 1,000 years ago. Then temperatures started to fall, and fall fairly consistently for quite a long time, until we reached the Little Ice Age, where things were so cold that in London, for instance, the River Thames froze solid, and the ice was so thick they could hold markets and fairs on the river. And then it warmed up again. So during all those considerable fluctuations in temperature, methane levels stayed pretty much exactly the same and clearly had no influence on the temperature at all. But Charlie, surely you know, methane is a much more potent greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. Yes, it is accepted that one methane molecule can absorb more energy than one carbon dioxide molecule. But how much methane is there in the atmosphere? Nitrogen makes up 78.1%, oxygen makes up 20.9%. So those two combined make up 99% of the atmosphere. The inert gas argon is 0.93%, carbon dioxide is 0.04% of the atmosphere, and methane is 0.00018%. These figures, of course, are quoted as dry air, but in fact water vapour can make up as much as 5% of the atmosphere if it's very humid. But because water vapour varies so much, they don't usually include it in the breakdown of atmospheric gases. But water vapour is by far the most significant greenhouse gas. It overshadows the effect of carbon dioxide and methane. So methane makes up a tiny part of the atmosphere. And we're told we need to cut back on meat. But what other things put methane into the atmosphere? Wetlands are a major source of methane in the atmosphere. Has anybody ever suggested we drain the remaining wetlands? I don't think anybody thinks that's a good idea. Rice paddies produce quite a bit of methane. Has anybody ever told you to eat less rice to save the planet? But they tell you to eat less meat. Landfill is a source of methane in the atmosphere, and absolutely we should reduce landfill. It's terrible that we have so much waste that we need to dump it in big holes in the ground. And of course the use of fossil fuels and natural gas are a huge contributor to methane. Natural gas is 90% methane, and the Industrial Revolution and the use of fossil fuels caused this considerable increase in methane after many, many centuries of stable levels. All these things combined have pushed methane levels up to 0.00018%. At what percentage do we need to reduce methane to so that people like Patrick Vallance and all the others who tell us to eat less meat will feel like we're not going to cook the planet? Now, you probably gathered that I'm a little sceptical about this, but I am not the only one. Let's have a word from some real top-class physicists. I'll quote from this publication entitled Methane and Climate, written by Dr. William van Wijngaarden and Dr. Will Happer. These are two of the world's leading physicists. In their introduction to this paper, they say, "The basic radiation transfer physics outlined in this paper gives no support to the idea that greenhouse gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and nitrous oxide are contributing to a climate crisis. Given the huge benefits of more CO2 to agriculture, to forestry, and to primary photosynthetic productivity in general, more carbon dioxide is almost certainly benefiting the world. Radiative effects of methane and nitrous oxide, another greenhouse gas produced by human activities, are so small that they are irrelevant to climate. Proposals to place harsh restrictions on methane emissions because of warming fears are not justified by facts." So if we all do, as people like Patrick Vallance tell us, and eat less meat, it won't make any difference to the climate at all, but it will make a difference. If we all cut back on our meat consumption by 10 or 20%, what will happen? Well, all the small family farms up and down the country that look after their livestock and look after the land that those livestock live on, they'll all go bankrupt. They'll all go bust. And then big corporations will move in and buy the land cheaply, and they'll probably get subsidies from the taxpayer to cover the land in solar panels and wind farms instead of growing meat on that land. And those same corporations will produce fake meat in a laboratory and sell that to us. Is this what you want? Is this what any of us want? Because that's what they want to force upon us. Now, Charlie, who is this they you keep referring to? Well, there are several organisations. Two of the most prominent are the International Panel on Climate Change, which is a political organisation, not an environmental one, and the World Economic Forum. Here are the opinions of some of the prominent people in these organisations. Ottmar Edenhofer was a prominent member of the IPCC from 2008 to 2015, and he said, "One has to free oneself from the illusion that international climate policy is environmental policy. Instead, climate change policy is about how we redistribute de facto the world's wealth." This man and his associates are not a modern-day Robin Hood. They're not going to take from the rich and give to the poor. They are going to take from the poor and keep it for themselves. This man is Klaus Schwab. He is a German billionaire and the head of the World Economic Forum. As humanity moves toward a post-carbon future, people must accept that things like eating meat and property ownership is simply unsustainable. Then, of course, there is the computer salesman Bill Gates, who thinks we should start eating 100% synthetic beef. I do think all rich countries should move to 100% synthetic beef, Gates said when asked how to cut back on methane emissions. You can get used to the taste difference, and the claim is they're going to make it taste even better over time. Eventually, that green premium is modest enough that you can sort of change the behaviour of people, or use regulation to totally shift the demand. Use regulation to totally shift the demand sounds a little bit sinister to me, Bill. What interest does he have in our food? Well, he has been very busy buying American farmland, and he's acquired quite a lot of it, which means that to an extent he can control food production. And of course, he intends to make even more money, because he is already heavily invested in the ultra-processed, plant-based and lab-grown fake food markets. This is not a man I'm going to be taking nutritional advice from, but of course he is selling it as a way to save the planet. We can't vote these people out of office because they are unelected. They are the self-appointed custodians of our lives. So we can't get rid of them, but we can ignore them and realise we are being manipulated and we are being lied to, and inform our children that they are being lied to about you have to eat less meat to save the planet. It's an agenda. I hope to speak to you again soon, and in the meantime, I wish you good health.